Welcome back, everyone. It is Eric from Rare Candy, and today we have our full look at Japan's new Triplet Beat set, which is going to be dropping over there on March 10th. Now, that being said, it's still going to be probably quite a while before we see these cards internationally. More than likely, these are going to be in the Paldea Evolved set closer to the summertime. So a lot could definitely change in that time. We are going to see more new Japanese sets drop, in the meantime. So the playability of these cards definitely could change a little bit by the time we do finally see these internationally. So just something to keep in mind as we are looking through these cards today. And I will say these are largely just my raw first impressions. We saw a couple of the cards from the set get revealed previously, but I'm kind of going into this blind and I'm really hoping we have some cool stuff waiting for us in this brand new Triplet Beat set. But with that being said, guys, remember to smack that like button, feed that always hungry YouTube algorithm, and let's jump in and see what we're going to be getting here in Triplet Beat. So we have Meowscarada EX, which is a card we already did see get revealed like when this set was first announced. But we'll recap on it. Stage 2, 310 HP, Fire Weakness to Retreat. But the ability, I think, is really what makes this card interesting. You must discard a Grass Energy from your hand, but then you put 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So kind of similar to the ability we have on Inteleon VMAX. But of course, if you have 3 or 4 of these guys in play, you can actually get a ton of damage counters into play just with this ability alone. And then its attack for 2 colorless energy does 100 plus 120 more if your opponent's active does have any damage counters on them. So there's definitely some good and bad here. The idea, of course, is you use this ability to set up this 120 damage buff, but the issue is that you can't actually target the active Pokemon, which means you're gonna have to do like shenanigans with like Escape Rope, or like Boss's Orders, or maybe even play Radiant Alakazam to just really ensure that you're always getting that 120 buff. Then also, like, you can use double turbo energy with Meowscarada, but that in and of itself is also a little bit clunky because then you're eating into the consistency of drawing into grass energies. So, because really you would like just grass energies if it were at all possible, just because that will increase the odds of you always being able to use this ability. But that being said, I still like the card. It's just kind of awkward in certain ways. Okay, so we have our first low kicks of the TCG. So 30 plus 100 if you evolve from Nimble, the pre-evolution. 130 for 1's not a horrible energy to damage ratio, but we don't have Scoop Up Net. So if your opponent just like bosses around this thing or escape ropes, that feels kind of bad. So this seems not the greatest to me. Okay, we have our first Paldea and Tauros. There are going to be 3 different ones in the set. We already did see these things get revealed like months ago now, or like a month ago at this point. But they all have this Fury Horn attack. It does 20 plus 10 for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So I think the idea here is you use cards like Magma Basin or Gape Jaw Bog to get damage counters on your Tauros to maybe hit for, a lot of damage with this attack. But even if you have 12 damage counters on your Tauros, you're still only hitting for 140 at that point, and that's going to be really difficult to actually get set up. That's a lot of work you have to put in over the course of several turns, more than likely, if you do want to hit for a decent amount of damage with this thing. There's cards to pull off this attack, but it's just, I don't think, worth the trouble you have to go through. And then 120 discard an energy, so nothing special here. Alrighty, we have Oricorio, another card we did see previously get revealed. So it has the ability, once during your turn, you can heal 20 from your active evolution Pokemon. So I'm pretty sure I mentioned this during my last video I did on Triplet Beat. This card kind of seems like just like a worse version of Radiant Serena, because Radiant Serena, it heals 20 from all of your Pokemon, not just one Pokemon that happens to be your active and evolution Pokemon. So this ability is definitely a lot more limited, but if you are still dead set on using maybe a different Radiant Pokemon, like let's say you really need Radiant Greninja for like your deck's core strategy to function, well, at that point, Oricorio does sort of accomplish, something similar for your deck. Might even be good for like some of the decks that use Magma Basin to heal off that 20 damage. Maybe with Gardevoir EX to be able to heal off whenever you are accelerating energies with that ability and taking damage counters. So I don't think this card is awful by any means, but it just kind of is overshadowed by Radiant Serena. And it's just pretty limiting given that it has to be your active Pokemon and that Pokemon does have to be an evolution. so we have another Paldean starter EX here. That's going to be Skeledirge EX. Of course, another card we already did see get revealed. That seems to be the trend of this video so far. But massive 340 HP. This guy is an absolute unit. You know, tied for the most HP in the game with Eternatus VMAX. So that's already really good. But first attack 50 and heal 30 from each of your Pokemon. And then 2 fire does 270, minus 10 for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Okay, so the 270, pretty good. That's a great number to hit for. That's going to knock out the vast majority of these like stage 1 Pokemon EX, but also with a Choice Belt or a Defiant Band if you want. You can even one-shot Pokemon V-Star, so that is actually pretty good. And honestly, the minus part of this attack isn't as bad as I think it seems, only because it does evolve from, you know, some low HP basics. Like, if this were a V-Star or a V-Max, the issue with this attack is that your opponent could always just attack into your pre-evolution, and because it has so much HP, you know, more than likely they can tank a hit from something that's doing like 180 or something, and that's going to like significantly nerf your damage output. But if they're bossing up and attacking your pre-evolution, well, first of all, it only gives up 1 prize, but also these low HP basics, let's see, that have... Okay, Fuecoco is actually a little bit tankier than most, but 80 HP on the low end, they're probably just knocking something like this out. So I think it's actually going to be difficult for your opponent to sort of preemptively set up like a damage reduction for you. So that is something I do like about this. But we also can play this with Cheryl if we really want to, because if our opponent does attack into us and is trying to reduce our damage output, well, we can go Cheryl, attach Fire for turn, Magma Basin to Armarouge on the bench, and move that energy back up to the active. So that actually seems like something you would be trying to sort of play for with this. So Skeledirge, you know, it's a little bit clunky, does have a lot going on here, but I actually do think this is kind of a decent stage too. We'll have to see, but definitely a card I'm going to have my eye on. Okay, we have the second Paldean Tauros. Again, the first attack is going to be the same as the fire one, but obviously this is going to be much worse since we can't use something like Magma Basin. And that second attack is just 60 snipe, so overall pretty awful. But we do have a new Gyarados, and I do think this got revealed previously, but it was like kind of underwhelming and I just kind of overlooked it if I remember right. First of all, 180 HP, that's great on a stage 1 single prizer, that's cool. But let's see, first attack 80, if you have more prize cards, saying your opponent does 100 more, okay. You know, that's not the worst thing in the world. And then 200 does 50 to itself, okay. Second attack, I don't think particularly great, but the first one, you know, it's not the hardest thing to power up, but there's other Pokemon that we would rather have 3 energy on, like a Giratina V-Star, or even like Arceus, or even Palkia if we want to play something like a water type. But yeah, it's not the worst card in the world, just nothing special. Okay, and for the final Paldean starter EX here, we have Quaquaval, of course, yet again, another card we have previously seen. So it does have lightning weakness, which right off the bat definitely could be an issue, since lightning definitely is looking a little bit more promising during the Scarlet and Violet era with Miraidon EX and the electricity generator card. So that definitely could be a problem for this, but let's take a look at its attacks here. So water for 60, switch with one of your bench Pokemon, and then your opponent switches. Okay, so 60 plus escape rope, essentially. Not the worst thing in the world, so we can switch into things like Klefki or even Diancie, so or like a Miltank. So this definitely isn't an awful hit and run style attack. And then second attack, 230, put 2 energy from this Pokemon into your hand. Okay, so I mean, I guess the idea here is you can use this attack to do 230, and then on the next turn, you know, your opponent's going to attack you, and then you can reattach and use this 60 damage attack and get out of harm's way and force your opponent to have a boss or something like that. That seems like what they're going for here. Or maybe sort of the inverse, you're just using this first attack to sort of poke at Pokemon, and when you're ready to clean up that KO, then you go for your second attachment and use this. Definitely could be an option. This is another card that could potentially use Cheryl as well, because you are just sort of reliant on this 1 energy attack a lot of the time. You know, if your opponent does try to boss you up and go for the 2-shot, you can just heal all that damage off, reattach, and switch to the bench. Now, its damage output is like a little bit weird though, because you're still not 2-shotting Pokemon VMAX. So like if you do both these attacks back to back, you're only doing 290 in total. So you are going to need something like Choice Belt, you know, against Mew VMAX, especially if they have Oricorio in play. You're going to need Choice Belt like for every time you attack. So that could be a little bit of an issue, but it's not as big of a deal against like Pokemon V-Star or Stage 1 Pokemon EX. And there actually is another Quaquaval that you can play. There's a single prize one that we're getting in Scarlet and Violet that has an ability where you accelerate energy from hand. So I think the idea they want here is, well, you get both these things into play. After you use this attack, maybe you can Cheryl, and then you can actually attach for turn and use the other Quaquaval to re-accelerate that second energy and keep on attacking. So this card actually seems like kind of okay. It definitely has some promise to it, but the lightning weakness, definitely a little bit of an issue to sort of contend with, but, you know, card definitely has some redeeming qualities to it. Okay, next up we have the Kilowattrel line. This thing's not that great, but honestly, Wattrel is the thing that really caught my attention here. So we have Wattrel with the Dangerous Wings attack. There's 20 for each Pokemon in your discard that has the Dangerous Wings attack. So we're no stranger to effects like this. Of course, leaving us in the rotation, we have the Mad Party deck, which basically did the same thing, 20 for each Pokemon with the Mad Party attack. And then prior to that, we had Night March, which again, same sort of thing. Now, I did do a quick look through of the set. This is actually the only card in the set that does have this attack. But of course, guys, like I said, we are going to be seeing some more cards come out in Japan before this set comes out internationally. So more than likely, I'd be willing to bet in Japan's next set, we're going to get more of these Pokemon with this Dangerous Wings attack. That way in the Pokemon, or not Pokemon, but the Paldea Evolved set that we're going to get is going to have probably like a whole archetype we can build with these things. So definitely a card to keep an eye out for. But as for the moment, at least, it's not doing anything else. Okay, so we have a new Mismagius, and I absolutely love the artwork on this thing. Thing looks great. But then it has this ability, when you play this card from hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may choose an energy attached to your opponent's active and move it to one of their benched Pokemon. So we've seen some effects like this throughout the course of the game. Usually more for like control decks have abused these sorts of effects. And there are cool things we can do with this. Like, let's say we're playing against Mew VMAX. You can take your opponent's double turbo energies and move them over to their Genesect or their Oricorio or something like that. And just eventually run your opponent out of energy that way. You know, I don't think the vast majority of decks are going to want something like this though. And since we are losing Scoop Up Net, it does make, you know, this card a harder sell, since you're not going to be able to as easily reuse these sorts of effects throughout the game. Okay, we have Dedenne EX. Again, another card we did see previously get revealed. This one actually was pretty recently though. This is one of the later cards that got a reveal. So you move all damage counters from one of your bench Pokemon to your opponent's active. So the idea here is maybe with Gardevoir, we are building up for like a big attack on like a Zacian V for the next turn or something like that, or even just powering up Gardevoir. Well, we can accelerate all that energy into play and then move that damage, you know, to our opponent's active and maybe take a knockout in the process. So that is definitely a possibility. There is also a Cresselia that does something different though, or something kind of similar. It's a little bit more limiting than this, but it only gives up one prize and only costs a single energy. So that might be a card that Dedenne has to sort of contend with for deck space. But the upside to Dedenne though is that it does have the Terrastal sort of ability built into it where it can't take bench damage. So, you know, that is a little bit of a bonus. Second attack, really nothing special, 170, discard energy. I don't think we're ever attacking with this. I think Tail Swap is definitely the attack that would ever really make us want to consider playing this in Gardevoir. But right now, just, you know, not completely convinced just yet. Okay, so we have Tinkaton. We did see this one get revealed, and I do think this is a kind of a cool card. Is it going to be competitive? Probably not, but I do like this card overall. Has this ability where you discard a card from your hand and draw 3. So it's kind of like Cincino that we have pre-rotation, or of course more like the Kirlia that we're going to see in Gardevoir decks, or also pretty much identical to the Swampert from Celestial Storm or the Hisuian Samurott back from, I believe it was Astral Radiance. So cool ability. It's always nice when these stage 2 Pokemon have these built-in consistency effects. And then its attack is 90 plus 90 more if this Pokemon has a special energy. So 180 for 2 isn't the worst thing in the world, guys, but it's on a stage 2. So it is going to be a little bit, you know, it's a lot to ask for a stage 2 Pokemon. So I don't think this is quite good enough. I think the card is fair. I think it's balanced, but as a result, it's probably just not good enough to actually be competitive. So even though there are good special energies, you know, like whatchamacallit, V-Guard energy, or even the new Luminous energy that we're going to have in this set, it's probably just not good enough at the end of the day. And for the last Paldean Tauros, this of course is going to be the fighting one. Again, that same first attack. And then second attack for 2 fighting and colors does 130, and this Pokemon takes 30 in the process. So this actually might be one of the better second attacks out of all of them, just because there are like a decent amount of fighting beat Pokemon we can hit for weakness with cards like Miraidon EX, or if we have like a choice belt, we can knock out Reggie Lucky VMAX. That being said, fighting Pokemon still don't have the best energy acceleration in the world, so I'm still not even sold that this would even see play, despite hitting some, you know, pretty good Pokemon for weakness. Okay, we have a Lycanroc EX. This is a new card. We have not seen this card before this set was revealed, so let's see what this guy does. 1 for 40, and then fighting 2 colors does 140. During your opponent's next turn, if this Pokemon is damaged by an attack, put 10 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. Okay, so I think the idea here is we swing into them with this attack, and then hopefully the 10 damage counters knocks out our opponent's Pokemon when they attack into us. I think that's the general idea, but my issue I have with this is that the numbers you're hitting for are kind of awkward. Like, even if we don't have a double turbo energy attached, reducing us down to only 120, and we have a choice belt and hit for 170, well, the 10 damage counter still only puts our opponent up to 270, and most of these stage 1 EXs, or more likely Pokemon V-Star, do have 280 HP, and that's sort of the magic number we need to hit for. And this is going to be a little bit awkward to sort of make up that difference. Like, there are cards you can play, like the Hawlucha from Scarlet and Violet, or we can play Grant, but you know, Grant's going to be a little bit difficult to make use of on the exact turns that we want it, and we still need a way to get this thing powered up without the use of double turbo energy. More than likely, we would have to rely on some sort of combination of Raihan, Gutsy Pickaxe, and probably even Koraidon EX in the early game as well. So I like Lycanroc. I think its attack is cool, but I really wish the numbers this hit for was a little bit better. You know, maybe once stage 1 Pokemon become a little bit more popular than Pokemon V-Star, you know, this attack does get a little bit better, since the HP on stage 1 EXs is generally, you know, 10, 20, 30 HP lower than V-Stars. But sort of until then, I think this damage output is going to be a little bit too awkward to hit for the numbers that we really want to. Okay, so we have Paldean Clodsire EX next up, and I didn't know this, but apparently Clodsire has these weird horns or something. I don't remember seeing these in the game, so that is kind of taking me by surprise. But nevertheless, new stage 1, 280 HP, fighting weakness, 3 retreat, and it has actually the same ability that we had on the Garbodor back from Rebel Clash. And this is actually our second set. You know, Rebel Clash was the second Sword and Shield set. This is going to be our second Scarlet and Violet set, so kind of fitting they're bringing this ability back, or kind of poetic, I guess you could say. So if there's a stadium in play, our opponent's poisoned, I guess that's okay. And then its attack for Dark and 2 colors does 200, and if you flip and get tails, you can't attack on the next turn. So I don't think its attack is great by any stretch of imagination. I think if we are playing Clodsire, it is going to be for this ability. But whenever this card got revealed, I already looked through the card pool, and there really wasn't a whole lot that seemed great to pair this with. I think probably our best partner at the moment, at least, is going to be the Seviper from Scarlet and Violet. You know, I think it hits for like 180 if they're poisoned, so that's all right. But honestly, I think there's better decks out there than just trying to poison and swing for 180. You know, with these things, this thing also can get shut off by Path to the Peak. And there's not too many stadiums, I think, that really pair like especially well with this. I mean, there's plenty of stadiums, but you know, there's nothing that really rewards sort of the poison effect that we're going for. So maybe in the future, or maybe even in this set, there's something else that we can play with this. But you know, based on what we currently have, I'm not too stoked on this thing. Okay, speaking of which, we do have a Sableye, and I guess maybe they're pushing this to be paired with Clodsire. So if they are affected by a special condition, does 90 for 1. So I guess effectively 100 if you factor in the poison, but Yeah, that is not good enough, unfortunately. But so far in this set, this is probably our best partner for Clodsire. Okay, next up we have Hydreigon, another early reveal we saw from the set. Has kind of an interesting ability. It reminds me a bit of the Gardevoir from Chilling Reign, kind of mixed with Archeops in there too. But you look at the top 3 cards of your deck and attach any number of energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way that you like, but then you discard the other cards. So the big comparison to Gardevoir is that we do look at the top several cards of our deck and accelerate energy. The big differences are that we look at one additional card and we can accelerate special energy, not just basic energy. So that is definitely good. But we do have to discard the other cards. And that is definitely a bit of a bummer. Gardevoir allows you to just keep the other cards, kind of like Intrepid Sword. And if we're playing a stage 2 like this, we're probably going to have a lot of moving pieces in our deck with cards like rare candies and other evolution pieces. So I think very frequently there are going to be cards we don't want to actually discard with this effect, especially since we're probably trying to set up multiple of these to have in play at a given point. Obviously, if we want to compare this to Archeops, both of these accelerate special energy. You know, the upside to Hydreigon is that we don't need to set up something like Lugia in addition to it, whereas Archeops does require a different Pokemon to already be in play to get Archeops out. But even still, I think Archeops is going to be easier to set up. You are going to have to rare candy, into Hydreigon here, and unlike Gardevoir, its pre-evolutions are nothing special. Like Zweilous has like an okay attack that can find your Pokemon, but overall, this thing seems pretty weak when we compare it to the other stage 2 accelerators that we have in the format. Oof, and that is rough. That is the end of our Pokemon, guys. We do have some new trainer cards, so hopefully they can sort of redeem the quality of this set, or lack of, I should say. So up first, we do have Superior Energy Retrieval. We already did see this card get revealed, but that's fine. It's a reprint of a pretty great card. We discard 2 cards from our hand, and then get 4 basic energies from discard back into our hand. So I think the big card there, sort of aiming to this to be played with, of course, is going to be the new Meowscarada EX, because we're discarding grass energies every turn for that ability. But yeah, this card is still great. We saw it see play in Blastoise decks, forever ago at this point. And, as long as there are decks running around that have cool effects that involve energy being in hand, this is definitely going to be a card they have to consider. We, of course, have a Great Ball reprint. Nothing has really changed. We sort of expected this card to come back at some point. It's always kind of lingering in the format, it seems. But of course, just look at the top 7, get a Pokemon, put it into your hand. But getting into, looks like our supporters, we have Dendra up first. I believe this one already was revealed as well. But you put a card from your hand at the bottom of your deck, then draw it until you have 5 in hand. So like the one thing I do like about this card is that frequently these sort of draw until effects that we see throughout the game can be clunky if you have like already a really just awkward hand and you can't play down any cards. Being able to actually eliminate, in this case, 1 card to be able to draw more is actually good. I do like that about this card's design, but this is still just a worse version of Karina's Focus, because even though Karina doesn't allow you to put any cards back, you get to draw until you have 6, which effectively is the same exact thing. But you can play Karina's Focus with a 0 card hand, whereas you cannot in the case of Dendra. So as long as Karina's Focus is in the format, I see absolutely no reason we would ever want to play this card. Next up from there, we have Clavel. Again, another early reveal. It seems like almost everything from this set was revealed ahead of time, or at least everything relevant, I should say. But you search your deck for 3 basic Pokemon that have 120 less HP and put them into your hand and shuffle your deck. So this is actually like a direct upgrade to Professor Elm's lecture back from the Sun and Moon era, which was a supporter that actually did see some pretty good play. But the big difference is that back during that time in the game, you could use supporters on turn 1. Whereas now, that is no longer the case, meaning that a card like this is only good on the first turn of the game going second. And that just makes this card just so limiting in terms of how we can actually play it. Now, like the upgrade this has over Gloria is that this is actually still good in the mid game, because even if you have like, or I shouldn't say good, but it's like decent maybe in the mid game, because if we have a full bench, we can still thin additional basics out of deck, whereas with Gloria, we actually can't. So I think this is probably just an upgrade to Gloria in most instances. But guys, I think I would still rather just play Battle VIP Pass. We can play it even on turn 1 of the game. But I guess maybe if your deck is playing Luminion V, maybe you play one of these just in case, but overall, right now, I still don't think these styles of supporters are going to be that good until we get one that says we can play it on the first turn of the game. Okay, up next from there, we have Faulkner. And Faulkner says draw 2 cards, but if we have a stadium in play, draw 2 more. So I'll actually say a straight draw 4 is actually pretty good. And the one thing I do like about this is that we can actually control the draw 4 effect. All we have to do is have a stadium in play. That being said, are we always going to have a stadium in play? Maybe not, but at least this is something we can play for. Like, there's other draw 2 effects where it's like, if your opponent's active is a V or VMAX or whatever, and stuff like that, that we can't really control. But since we can, if we just stack our deck full of stadiums, we can actually just consistently draw 4, which is pretty solid. This is actually, I think, a card that I could see a lot of people just writing off immediately just as a knee-jerk reaction. The only thing I wish was different is that I wish it said if there is a stadium in play rather than it being our stadium. That, I think, would make me a little bit more solid on my like of this card, but as a result, I still have a little bit of reservation, but this is actually probably one of the better cards out there that has potential for a draw 4 effect. We, of course, have a boss reprint, and we also have Artisan Town. It's going to be our first stadium here. So once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a basic Pokemon, excluding Pokemon that have a rule box, and play it onto their bench. Then that player shuffles their deck. So this is actually Nest Ball for essentially 1 prize Pokemon, which is really good. That's actually a really, really good effect. Now, the downside is this also gives your opponent access to this same effect, which you might not want. But I mean, we've seen stadiums that have these sorts of, effects that benefit both players pretty equally do well in the past. I think an example is Sky Arrow Bridge, which of course now is Beach Court. That's kind of one that immediately jumps out to me, or a card like Tropical Beach. Both players can benefit from that. And especially if we're going against something like maybe Mew V Max, well, most of their deck is going to be Pokemon V, so we sort of disproportionately do benefit. So there are still going to be situations where this is a little bit one-sided for you as a player. That being said, is this still going to see play? I imagine this would. I'm not sure what deck off the top of my head does want this, but this definitely seems cool. Again, just curious what deck this is going to slot into. And for our last trainer card, we have Lesson Studio. It's going to increase the damage of each player's stage 1 Pokemon by 10 damage. So 10 damage doesn't seem like a lot, guys, but frequently a lot of knockouts do come down to, hey, I just need this choice belt to get over the hump to finish off my opponent's active. And again, much like with Artisan Town, I'm really not sure what deck really wants this, especially since we don't have too many viable stage 1 decks running around currently. But of course, guys, as we're getting more of these stage 1 Pokemon EX, there are going to be times where this 10 damage is make or break for a one-shot, and Lesson Studio could be good in those situations. So a card that probably has more long-term potential than short-term. And getting into our energy, both of these have already been revealed, but we'll still recap them a little bit here. So up first, we do have Jet Energy, and this is most likely going to see play in Lost Box decks if it does. So it provides colorless energy, but when we attach this from our hand to one of our bench Pokemon, we switch that Pokemon with our active. So the reason I say we would play this in Lost Box is because this is almost kind of like a +2 into the Lost Zone if we're attaching this to Comfy. Because what we can do is we can use a Flower Selecting with our active Pokemon, get a card into the Lost Zone, attach this to a benched Comfy, so move that to the active, and then we can still actually hard retreat into a different one and still be able to play a switch card to then pivot into our attacker for turn. So again, it's a +2 into the Lost Zone for turn. Just think of it that way. And we've seen Lost Zone decks play cards like Capture Energy and low counts. So I imagine this could pop up as like a 1 of, maybe a 2 of. I really wouldn't expect anything, much higher than that. Also, maybe this could be a card for Lugia V-Star. Even though it doesn't have any effect when we accelerate it with Archeops, we still just need energy to accelerate with the deck. And whenever we have this in hand, this could be a switching card that could allow us to, preserve some of our energy in play and not have to discard it, which is good when it comes to special energy, which are notoriously difficult to actually recycle and get back throughout the course of a game. And Luminous Energy is going to be our last card. This is effectively a reprint of Multi-Energy from back in the day. So it provides every type of energy at the same time, but it only works when you don't have additional special energies attached, which is kind of a bummer. Otherwise this would kind of make decks like Lugia V-Star closer to their pre-rotation version. But that being said, I actually could see this still seeing play in Reggie. You're going to play probably 4 Luminous Energy and then probably just a hodgepodge of different basic energies and low counts. So this definitely helps Reggie inch its way back into relevancy, even though I don't think it's going to quite do the job completely. But right now, I'm not seeing like the blatant use for this card. I'd be willing to bet that will change over time, again, just because Multi-Energy was a card that did see play. But for the moment, this card, it does sort of have a question mark on top of it. But that is going to be all for Triplet Beat. And I gotta say, guys, this set is, it's not that great. It almost kind of reminds me of Incandescent Arcana. That was like one of Japan's last sets that wound up being, molded into our Silver Tempest set, which was honestly not that great outside of Lugia. And yeah, there's just not a whole lot to really get stoked on. There's cards with potential, I think, especially some of the trainer cards aren't awful. Superior Energy Retrieval, obviously a good reprint. But in terms of Pokemon, guys, I didn't see a whole lot that really excited me. I think probably the cards that were most appealing are probably going to be some of the Paldean starters. That being, of course, Quaquaval, Skeledirge, and of course what's the name of it? Meowscarada as well. So I think those are still probably my top picks for new Pokemon from the set. But let me know your full thoughts on the set down below in the comment section. Do you think this set is, kind of weak like me? Or what cards are you guys looking forward to from the set? Let me know your full thoughts down below in the comment section. But as always, guys, if you did enjoy today's content, remember to leave a like on the video. And if you're feeling maybe a little bit extra generous and want to take that support to the next level, you can also become a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg or pick up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.